Clearly, they just wanted to prove me wrong.
Well, what has happened over the last, 3 weeks or so? What has changed that this team was playing well? They were in a nice little groove, and now it looks like they're going through the motions. So when and what has happened to get them to basically playing out the string?
It's tough to find a trend in the gameplay itself. The trend that's been disturbing is that they're not that they're playing down to competition when they're playing against lesser teams. They're playing against Chicago tonight, so they'll probably win because they always seem to show up against teams that are better than them. But it was putting away the teams that they should have put away and couldn't that I think is one of the biggest reasons why this team is not going to the playoffs. I mean, coaches and players aren't shy about talking about that and the inconsistency this year. It's just you never know what you're going to get with this team from one day to the next.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. 0-6-3 in their last 9 games versus non-playoff teams. 8-1-4 versus playoff teams the last 13 games. I mean, that stat right there is basically your season. 0-6-3. That's a ton of points missed by this team. Let's take a look at the future going forward here because so much conversation now, Dave, surrounding the coach. It seems that you get a year and a half here, and then that's it. But is that going to be the realization that that Craig Berube at the end of this year could be let go?
Oh, definitely. I think he's aware of that too. I mean, he said yesterday, if you don't make the playoffs, especially in this town, you never know what's going to happen. And by saying you never know what's going to happen, you know exactly what's going to happen. You're not coming back. And I think that's almost a certainty at this point.
Is it just? I mean, is he not the right guy? Do you think they should stick it out? I mean, 1 year is not a long time. A year and a half. Well, I guess he had almost 2 full years, but
right. It was just those 3 games at the beginning of last season that he wasn't, the coach for. But there's plenty of blame to go around here. I mean, he was given a flawed roster, and at a certain point, it was okay. He has this flawed roster, but then there are times where you look at the decisions of who was getting in the lineup of those guys on that roster and who wasn't. And, I don't care if you have a third of what Vinny Lecavalier used to be. He's not getting into games and have, a 20. I mean, now they're out of the playoffs, so you play a 21-year-old rookie now at center, which is the position that he's wanted to play all year and hasn't because he's been sent to the right wing. And you've been playing back Ronaldo for a lot of the year, who you don't expect offense from, and you're saying, well, why isn't Vinny Lecavalier scoring? It's because he's not playing in those games. So, that's just one of the issues regarding the roster and who's been playing well when they've been in there and who hasn't. You look at the carousel on defense there for a while when they had a lot of healthy defensemen and who was getting in and who wasn't having to take their turn sitting out. Braden Coburn was never sat as a healthy scratch. Nick Grossman was never sat as a healthy scratch. Mark Streit, although he's one of the guys that the Flyers look to quite often, was never sat as a healthy scratch. You had Luke Shen, who probably better than anybody else on the team. Andrew McDonald, who hasn't been great, hasn't even been remotely as good as the Flyers thought he would be, giving him a 6-year, $30 million contract. There's been a lot of blame to go around, but I think when you see teams that don't look motivated, and the Flyers have been a team like that for a good portion of the season, that generally means that the coach is going to having to update his resume.
Yeah, the Lecavalier thing is very peculiar to me. He's not going to play tonight. A 3rd game in a row is a healthy scratch. You might want to say, hey, over the last 5-10 games here, let's see if we have some. We're playing you on the 4th line. Maybe we want to see if you can give us a spark. What's the difference at this point? I think this whole situation has been pretty mismanaged there. But in this offseason, Dave, do you anticipate wholesale changes? I know during the trade deadline we were anticipating and wondering, but do you think we could see some major names be changed this time around?
There's a few it depends things going on there. I mean, that's tough. The young guys that other teams may want aren't the ones that are eating up a good portion of the Flyers' salary cap. So, it doesn't do them a whole lot of good to get rid of a few young guys who aren't making, top dollar yet. The guys that are making top dollar are R.J. Umberger, who is going to be available for the start of training camp, but is on crutches right now and recovering from injury. Nobody's going to be trying to, busting down the doors to trade for him. LeCavalier, who might actually be better served with another coach coming in here next year if he gets a chance. I mean, you were talking about him on the fourth line. He's been there pretty much the entire season. He was second line center, which is what the Flyers thought he was when they signed him, for all of 4 or 5 games this year. Who else could go? It's tough. They still have, even after trading Coburn and trading Tiemann, have quite a few defensemen. If they want to bring a kid or two up next year, if they want Samuel Morin or Shane Gostisbehere here next year, they might have to get rid of one of those guys that are on the roster right now. And like nobody's busting down the door for those guys either. So it's going to be a lot of selling on Ron Hextall's part if there is a lot of turnover in the summer.
Dave, let's go back to Berube real fast. Was Berube Hextall's guy, or was that more of a choice from Paul Holmgren?
Well, Holmgren was general manager last year when that coaching change was made.
Right.
I think that Hextall is comfortable with Berube, but he also sees the lack of results. So, going forward, I don't think Berube is Hextall's guy. I think he's comfortable with him and would have been if he had success. But to say his guy or the guy, no, probably not. But that also is due in part to the Flyers' lack of success this season.
Dave Isaac's with us, CourierPostOnline.com, at Dave G. Isaac. The Flyers play tonight against the Blackhawks, and the return of Kimmo Timonen against his former team, he was pretty emotional about it. That kind of telling, because he said, I'm here now. That was kind of the end of the sentence there, like I'm here in Chicago now, but it was pretty interesting to see that it almost feels like even though they're successful and they've been very good with Kimmo there, it almost seems like he would almost still rather be here with his teammates in Philadelphia.
Well, he talked about how sympathetic he was to them being as far out of the playoff picture as they are now, and he's had seasons like that in the past too. But you're right. Today is an emotional day for him. But would he rather be back here? I mean, he will in a couple months. He's done one way or another. He's retiring after this season, whether he wins the Stanley Cup or not. So he'll come back to this area. His family's here. He never, sold his house. Kids are in school here. They're going to stay here for a while. But don't get me wrong. This guy is very glad that he's got a chance to play for the Stanley Cup one more time. And he talked today about how he hadn't skated in 10 months, and that's a really big deal. He's still, the Blackhawks took a leap of faith in trading for him because he is still working his way back to trying to get into, NHL game shape. And Joel Quenneville, the Chicago coach, talked about that this morning. How he said he would like to get him more ice time, but a lot of the games that Chicago's been playing have been 1-goal games, close games, and he can't afford to. Kind of let him in and not learn on the fly because he's got so much experience, but kind of, get back to form on the fly just because of what those games have been like. So I think that Timonen's very glad that he's got the chance to do this, with a team that could potentially win the Stanley Cup, but there's no questioning that he's a little homesick right now, too.
All right, you'll hear from Kimmo coming up in the 5 o'clock hour in Jen Scordo's update. For more on the Flyers, at Dave G. Isaac. Last one for you, Dave. A couple of years ago, I guess it's been more than a couple of years ago now, the Flyers traded their 2 most high-profile players. What do you think Claude Giroux's role has been this year in this team's, I would say, failure? I guess not making the playoffs in the NHL, especially in Philadelphia, is pretty much a failure. Do you think that, what do you think his season has been like, and how would you kind of surmise his role in why this team is where they are?
Well, if Jake Voracek hadn't, torn it up for so much of the year, I think there would be more talk about Giroux having a pretty good season. Pretty good, not great, not blowing guys out of the water, not an MVP finalist like he was, recently. But he's been a good player for this team this year. He's not the vocal captain. He's never going to be Chris Pronger in that regard. He's not going to He just doesn't have the type of personality to call guys out one by one if things aren't going right. He's a lead by example kind of guy, and Mike Richards was that kind of way too. So I don't think there's a whole lot of this failure that you can put on Giroux. There have been statistical anomalies this year in a lot of different cases. I mean, Steve Mason has 2 shutouts on the road this year and one win on the road, and the one win isn't either of the 2 shutouts. So, Claude Giroux not scoring an even strength goal on home ice for 14 months or whatever it is. It's just one of those statistical anomalies. I don't think you can point the finger at him too much because without him, where would this team be? But, he's just a lot of people look for him to be that, when things are going bad, the leader that's vocal, and that's just not akin to his personality.
All right, Dave Isaac, Flyers, Blackhawks tonight at 8 o'clock in Chicago, and it should be fun to see Kimo back on the ice, because if you hadn't seen him at all this year, he got traded before he even played a game in Philadelphia. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Mike.